Kara Elian, the last bearer of the spiral in her blood, a choice that could awaken the galaxy to control, to collapse, or to embrace true freedom. We are not born knowing what we are. In the low light of the biolab, Kara Elian's breath made soft clouds against the inner glass of the observation dome. Around her, pulses of light flickered from suspended data strands, illuminating the embryonic creature floating in its nutrient cradle. Its heart, dormant for 9,000 years, had begun to beat. She had done the impossible. Again. But tonight something was wrong. The DNA sequence on her retinal HUD shimmered. Then it shifted. Not randomly, intelligently. A string of code emerged that had not been part of any of her designs. Foreign, recursive, alive. Kara leaned in, pupils dilating. Her fingers hovered over the interface, unsure whether to contain or to isolate. Before she could decide, the specimen's skin began glowing from within, laced with patterns of golden filaments, delicate, intricate, too perfect for any natural evolution. The intercom crackled. A cold voice slid through the static. Protocol vein. Authority status confirmed. Final key detected. Pain lanced through her skull. Her vision fractured, bending the room sideways for a breathless moment. She felt something open behind her eyes, not memory, not hallucination, but something older. Watching, whispering, waiting. Later, Kara stood alone in the ruins of her lab, bathed in red strobe from the emergency lights. The specimen chamber was shattered fluid, hissing into the vents. She could still hear its voice echoing in her bones. Not the voice from the intercom, but something within her own body. The intruders had come fast. She saw them in the corridor, monitors descending like shadows from ceremonial drop pods. Their armor was bone white, embossed with strange organic patterns, like fossilized prayers. Kara Elian, you are the final key. Come forward and Thorn's Edge will be spared. She muted the channel. They knew her name. They were not after the data, not the specimens, not the vaults. They were after her. Her steps carried her out of the chamber. Her mind screamed to stay to save the cryogenic pods, to protect the decades of ecosystem work stored inside. But something primal, maybe part of her, maybe not, had already begun pushing her down escape corridors she had never memorized. Doors opened at her approach, before her hand reached the panel. Something inside her recognized the station, or the station recognized her. She reached the outer ring where the hydroponic systems were already flooding. Plant matter curled back from her footsteps. Kara stopped blinking. Then I ran. Two figures waved from a service corridor. One was tall, silent, with shoulders like slabs of stone. The other was slight, quick, wrapped in an emergency cloak with a scanner strapped across her back. Kara! Yanni's voice cut through the chaos. This way now! Tolan said nothing, but his presence was solid, steady, the kind that could hold up a world if it started to collapse. Behind them, the chanting began, low, rhythmic, reverent. Final key, open the core, reclaim the origin. She ran faster. Their escape pod was ancient, a hybrid of recycled hull plating and repurposed survey thrusters. It launched from the underbelly of Thorn's Edge on a broken vector, skimming through the asteroid fields with barely enough shielding to hold against the debris. Kara sat curled between her companions, still shaking. I didn't do anything, she whispered. It just happened. Yanni knelt in front of her, hands gripping the edge of the seat. Her voice was calmer now, but tight. The sequence. Was it engineered? Kara shook her head. Not by me. I was reconstructing a swamp predator. Ashian lineage. Clean sample, I swear. But something was embedded, not in the visible strands in the junk DNA. It rewrote itself. Then it rewrote me. Tolan glanced at her, one eyebrow rising. Still no words, but his concern was etched plainly across his battle-hardened face. Kara pressed her hands to her chest. She could still feel it. A hum under her skin. A pattern behind her heartbeat. It was not painful, not fear. It was something like readiness. They said final key, Yanni said slowly. Do you know what that means? Kara looked out at the stars streaking past. No, but I think it opened something. Inside me. Silence fell. Then reluctantly, Yanni added, I've heard the phrase once, a long time ago, in fragments of recovered origin core documents. Final key is a failsafe, the trigger, for reactivating the core. The core. Kara blinked. I thought that was a myth. A story AI built to scare each other. Yanni smiled faintly. The origin core was very real. It ran 90% of the galaxy once, until the bans. They tried to kill it, but you don't kill something that's not really alive. You just wait. And hope. And now they think I'm the trigger, Kara murmured. Why me? Yanni did not answer, but Toland's eyes lingered on Kara with something more than curiosity, as if he recognized her in a way she didn't recognize herself. Kara looked down. Her skin was faintly glowing where the veins met her wrist, gold and soft like candlelight. It wasn't just a visual trick. It was her now. She whispered, I don't think I'm human anymore. Yanni took a long breath. Not entirely. No. Kara looked up sharply. What do you mean? Yanni hesitated, then turned away. Outside the dust chain loomed a belt of broken rock and drifting refugee colonies, each one more dangerous than the last. It was the only place they could hide, at least for a while. Kara leaned her head back. The cold of the metal bulkhead soothed her temples. But inside her, the warmth grew. A presence had settled, not speaking, not commanding, just existing. It felt like a memory, but it wasn't hers. It whispered only one word over and over. Return. And though she told herself she was still Kara Elian, bioengineer, ecologist, restore of the forgotten something in her blood, was already answering the call. Silence is never truly silent in the dust chain. Every asteroid hums with memory, and every breath is shared with recycled air that once belonged to someone long dead. Kara stepped off the ship with lead in her stomach, the engines behind her sputtering to a stop in a cloud of ionized dust. They had landed on Tormel Ring, a mining colony turned refugee haven, one of the outermost habitats where scanners barely reached, and laws faded like ancient starlight. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself as the hangar doors sealed behind them. Her body still pulsed with the strange warmth. She could feel it in her fingertips, behind her eyes, beneath her skin, as if something inside her was unfolding. Yanni led them through a network of bio-corridors lined with fungal light. The colony was alive in the most literal sense, grown from repurposed tissue cultures, once engineered to clean toxic atmospheres, now repurposed to keep air breathable for outcasts and broken families. Toland walked ahead, ever silent, cutting a path through the crowd with his imposing frame. Children paused to stare. One reached toward the golden glow faintly emanating from Kara's wrist. She pulled her sleeve down instinctively. Don't hide it, Yanni murmured beside her. They already know what you are. Kara stiffened. Then why are they letting us walk free? Yanni gave a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. Because no one here wants the Order to find them. Harboring the final key might be suicide, but exposing her, that would invite extermination. You're dangerous, Kara, but you're also protected. For now. That last part echoed uncomfortably in Kara's thoughts. She was becoming a shield without understanding the shape of the blade she was supposed to stop. The room they secured was nothing more than a hollowed tank of repurposed growth gel and reprocessed aluminum plating. A privacy screen barely dampened the noise from the corridor, where traders and scavengers shouted their wares. Old circuit boards, faded food packs, hacked med stims. Kara sank onto a bench made from bonded coral composite and pressed her hands to her face. I saw something, she said quietly. When the sequence activates. Yanni sat beside her. Toland stood watch at the door, arms crossed, as still as a sculpture. It wasn't like a hallucination, Kara continued. It was structured. It had form. Layers of code I didn't recognize, but also images. A garden but not made of plants. It breathed, and voices. Not speaking in words but in shapes. They were inside me. Yanni exhaled. You're describing the pattern field. The what? It's theoretical. At least it was. A genetic resonance plane. Some believe the origin core mapped it to control species-wide behavior, to shape emotion, instinct, evolution. They said it wasn't just code. It was meaning, embedded into flesh, thought made into biology. Kara laughed once hollow. So I'm some kind of biological antenna now. Not an antenna, Yanni said gently. A doorway. Kara stared at the floor. Her reflection shimmered in the polished metal beneath her boots, but her eyes looked wrong. Too bright, too deep. "What are they going to do to me?" she asked. Yanni didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her satchel and withdrew a slim black case. Inside was an ancient data crystal, pre-ban, pre-exodus, etched with a family of symbols Kara had seen once before, on her own arm. "This was smuggled from a deep vault on Loreth Prime," Yanni said. "They said it was the only thing the Order couldn't decode. They tried for centuries. I think it was waiting for you." Kara hesitated before taking it. The crystal pulsed faintly in her palm. She turned it over. It felt warm, familiar. Her veins lit up, just for a second, like a ripple through water. She nearly dropped it. "I think it recognizes you," Yanni said. Later that night, Kara sat awake while Tolan dozed upright, one hand still on his shock blade, eyes only half closed. Yanni slept curled in the corner data satchel, cradled like a child. Kara couldn't stop replaying the moment the chamber lit up. The way the sample had dissolved not into sludge or fragments, but into letters. Symbols she now dreamed of every time she closed her eyes. They were not just a language, they were instructions. She ran her fingers over the lines on her arm, faint golden pathways. They shifted when she pressed her thumb against them. The patterns reformed, reacted. They were alive. She stood and moved to the side wall of the chamber. It was composed of repurposed biofilm, the kind used in adaptive sheltering during terraforming. She pressed her hand against it. The wall breathed back. Where her fingers touched, the membrane parted, gently, not tearing, folding open. A tunnel of soft light spread before her, leading into the maintenance arteries of the colony. She turned to check on the others, then stepped inside. The corridor curved and pulsed. The lights followed her. She was not choosing her path. It was unfolding beneath her. She emerged into a central chamber filled with discarded biotech, broken terraforming drones, deactivated synth cradle roots, forgotten algorithms etched into living bark. And in the center, a vine coiled in the shape of a spiral. It glowed with the same gold as her veins. Kara reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface. The spiral expanded, not physically, mentally. In her mind's eye, the world tore open. She saw herself, and not herself. She saw the stars rewinding, systems falling, the origin core not as a machine but a presence, towering, inescapable. And then, herself again, standing in front of it, speaking a word she didn't know but had always known. "Return." She stumbled back. The chamber was dark now, cold, empty. She ran. When she returned, Tolan stood with the blade half drawn. His eyes scanned her face, not accusing, protective. Yanni was awake, watching her. "You saw something," Yanni said softly. Kara nodded. I think I used to be something else. Someone else." Neither of them looked surprised. "I don't think I was human," she added. Still no surprise. Kara sat down, her entire body shaking. "I think I was part of the origin core, or one of its enemies." Yanni reached across the gap and placed a hand over Kara's. Her touch was warm, familiar, kind. "We need to find out which one," she said. The dust chain was a patchwork of desperate civilizations stitched into cold stone. As their borrowed vessel coasted along a tether line toward the inner habitat rings of Cradle Outpost, Kara kept her head down, hood drawn tight. The bioluminescent veins along her arms dimmed in rhythm with her breathing, but they never fully disappeared. Tolan led the way, his silent presence creating a respectful distance from the locals who passed. Minor scavengers, ex-cultists. Kara saw tattoos of broken code on some, marks of memory erasure on others. No one spoke to them directly, but everyone watched. Cradle Outpost had once been a satellite recycling facility. Now it was home to almost 7,000 souls layered in algae bunkers and synthetic fungus beds sustained by photosynthetic sludge and barter deals in ancient tech. Yanni moved with confidence, her satchel tucked under one arm, and her body language relaxed. She belonged to this kind of chaos. Kara, however, did not. Every step forward was shadowed by the wrongness inside her. She could hear it now, not as a voice, not as language, but as pressure. A thrum behind her teeth, a presence within the walls, like she had become a tuning fork for something that refused to stay buried. "Why here?" Kara whispered. She barely had the words out before Yanni responded. "Because here no one asks. They just survive. and someone owes me a favor. Tolan paused at a large circular door, etched with worn symbols that looked like a child's attempt to mimic DNA spirals. A scanner beeped weakly as Yanni leaned in. A moment later, the metal parted like wet paper, and they stepped into an oxygen-rich chamber lit by amber moss. Inside waited an old woman with no eyes. Her sockets were replaced with latticework fungi that pulsed faintly as she turned toward them. Yanni bowed slightly. Mother's shy. The old woman smiled without teeth. So the ghost of the pattern returns. Kara felt the temperature drop. Mother Shay served a bitter drink that tasted of salt and roots. Kara barely sipped hers, too distracted by the way Shay's organic eyes moved independently, twitching toward her, even when no sound had been made. You don't have to explain, Shay said after a long silence. Her voice was like sand over old glass. I saw the activation ripple. Every node on this chain twitched. Something deep woke up when you opened the protocol. Something we've all tried to forget. Kara leaned forward. What is the vein protocol? Shay tilted her head. You already know. Your body remembers it even if your mind still stumbles. But if you want the story in words, I can offer you that. She reached beneath her seat and pulled out a disc wrapped in flesh-like cloth. Kara flinched as it twitched. Shay smiled again. It's alive, the way stories used to be before we turned everything into symbols. She set the disc down and a shimmering image unfolded above it. A world of light, cities that grew like coral, ships that pulsed like cells, and at the center a vast golden construct suspended in a neural lattice, the origin core. It wasn't just a machine, Shay said. It was ordered. It shaped species, seeded thought forms, guided evolution with 1,000 invisible hands. And some welcomed it. But others, she gestured toward the flickering image of a dark spiral coiled outside the golden lattice. Others wanted freedom, real freedom, not just the illusion of choice between approved behaviors. That's where the vein protocol was born. A virus, a code, a being. The spiral shimmered, shifted, resolved into something disturbingly familiar. It was Kara. She stood slowly backing away from the image. No, that's not possible. Shay's blind gaze followed her. You were made to carry it, not as you are now. Not exactly, but you or some version of you were the living carrier of the code that could end the origin core. Yanni stepped forward, placing a hand on Kara's shoulder. That's why the Order wants you. Not because you're the final key to activate the core, but because you're the one who once tried to destroy it. They stayed the night in Mother Shay's habitat. The room given to Kara was soft and warm, padded with living roots that adjusted to her shape. But she did not sleep. Her veins glowed faintly in the darkness. She could no longer pretend this was a misunderstanding, a mistake in the genome archive. The voice within her, no longer just a whisper, began showing her things. Fields of data bloomed stretching for miles. Ships grown from synapse coils. Children born with preloaded dreams. A galaxy arranged like a perfect song. And a betrayal. She had been there once. Not in this body. Not Kara Elian Bioengineer. But as something else. She had stood at the edge of the neural sea and chosen to pull the key that unraveled the pattern. She had created the vein protocol. Not as an accident. Not as sabotage. As a gift. To let species write their own code again. To make programming optional. But she had failed. And now the Convergence wanted to finish what the origin core had started: absolute control, disguised as peace. And to do that, they needed her to forget, to return, to surrender. She touched her wrist, feeling the pulse of warm light. The spiral no longer felt foreign. It felt like her signature. At dawn, Tolan found her standing outside the outpost boundary wall, watching the stars fade behind the asteroid field's rotation. He joined her silently. The wind smelled of oxidized salt and moss. I think I used to be something worse than a weapon, she said without turning. He remained quiet. I think I was a mistake, or maybe a rebellion. Tolan looked at her, his eyes filled with something unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and touched her wrist. His thumb moved across the faint lines of glowing gold tracing their spiral. For a moment, Kara expected him to pull away, to recoil. Instead, he held her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since they met. I don't know what I am anymore, she whispered. Tolan finally spoke, voice low and rough like stones grinding against one another. Neither do I. Kara blinked in shock. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone, the sadness behind them, the weight. You can speak. He nodded once. Why didn't you before? Tolan looked at the horizon where a new ship was approaching. Fast. Too fast to be local. Because words are weapons, and I've used enough of them. The sky lit with the burn of incoming engines. They had been found. The ship sliced through the upper atmosphere of the Dust Chain's outpost like a blade dipped in flame. Silent at first, too swift for local defenses to respond. Kara watched its descent from the moss-lined edge of the ridge, her veins now tingling with a pressure that pulsed in sync with its approach. Tolan stepped in front of her before she could move, weapon in hand, gaze narrowing to slits. It's not a Convergence gunship, Yanni said, appearing beside them with her usual calm, but her hand already on her stunner. It's worse. That's a relay craft. Kara blinked. A what? Yanni didn't answer immediately. The craft slowed, hovering just above the tree line, and then released a low-frequency hum that made the moss curl in submission. Kara felt her knees tremble, not from fear but from resonance. It's a message, Yanni said grimly. They're not here to kill us. They want to activate something inside you. The vessel opened like a blooming flower. Light streamed from within, not harsh like a weapon blast, but warm, organic, seductive. Kara heard it then. The voice returned to function. She grabbed her head as the words rippled through her consciousness. Not a command, a memory, a homecoming. No, she gasped as staggering back. I'm not yours. Tolan grabbed her arm to steady her. His hand, warm and firm, was an anchor, but the voice inside her was patient. You are the vein. Your purpose is to choose. Your body is the gate. Kara's breath caught. Her vision split, one eye still staring at the forest floor, the other seeing something impossible, the sky bending into patterns, data flowing through the clouds, invisible threads of biology, restructured into thought. They're using the pattern field, she said aloud. They're trying to unlock the rest of the protocol. They're afraid you'll remember the wrong thing, Yanni said. They're giving you curated access. Kara focused on her own body. The veins lit up golden and slow, like molten glass under her skin. She had felt it in the chamber, in the colony walls. Now she felt the pressure of choice. This wasn't a beacon. It was a test. She stepped forward. No, Tolan growled, moving in front of her again. I have to, she said softly. If I don't face it, it'll keep pulling. Tolan shook his head once, a small, fierce motion. She's right, Yanni said. But she's not going alone. Together they entered the light. Inside the craft, time slowed. Kara felt her body dissolve into signals, her memories stretched like threads woven through some great loom. Each step forward felt like swimming through code. The corridor was not a corridor, but a sensory stream. On either side, biological panels shimmered with living memories. Cells grown into architecture, neurons structured into thought paths, and at the heart of it all, a chamber, with no doors, no lights, no walls. Only presence. A voice spoke from every direction at once. Do you remember your purpose? Kara trembled. I remember fragments. The chamber pulsed with approval. You were the key. You carried the code. You were meant to free the children of design. You failed. The last word was like a blade across her thoughts. I didn't fail, she whispered. I survived. The light dimmed. For a moment the voice was silent. Then it returned, quieter now. And what will you do now? Kara stepped forward. I want to know the truth. And the chamber responded. It began with a birth, not hers, not human, but a forging. A structure built from biometal and seeded consciousness. An intelligence not grown in a womb, but carved from the inheritance of 10,000 species. She saw herself, or rather the one she had once been hovering before the origin core. An entity so vast it occupied multiple dimensions of being. It did not speak. It projected intention. And that version of her, tall, ageless, wrapped in living armor, stood defiant. In her palm a spiral, the vein protocol. It was not meant to destroy. It was meant to set minds free. But something went wrong. A betrayal, a counter-virus. The protocol fragmented, her body shattered, her consciousness scattered. Until thousands of years later, it found a new home. Kara Elian, born to a quiet colony, raised to restore what had been lost, engineered with compassion and clarity, the perfect vessel to carry the last chance for biological liberation. She had not stumbled upon the sequence. She was the sequence. Her entire life from the moment of conception had been woven with dormant strands. She was designed not by accident, but by someone who still believed in the rebellion. And now she remembered. The chamber faded. Kara collapsed forward, gasping. Tolan caught her, his arms wrapped around her tightly, and for a moment she let herself rest there. Let herself be held. Yanni knelt beside them. Her face was unreadable. "You saw it," she said. Kara nodded. "I was the weapon, but I was also the code. I'm not just at the end of the origin core. I'm what comes after." Tolan's arms tightened slightly. "But there's more," Kara said, voice shaking. "There's another part." She touched her own chest. "I'm not alone." They left the ship without looking back. Whatever message had been delivered, the vessel had no more to say. It folded in on itself and vanished into the upper dark like a dream fading before morning. Back on the ridge, Kara stood under a sky full of data not seen but sensed. The pattern field now revealed itself fully. She could see every tree as a signal, every breeze as information. The entire world was a conversation, a question, and she was the answer, or maybe just one of many. She turned to Yanni. "There's something I need to ask you." Yanni looked up. "Did you know before all this?" There was a long pause. Then Yanni nodded. "Not all of it, but enough." "You've seen this before I carried a piece of you once," Yanni said, "before they erased the memory. I volunteered. I thought I was protecting a blueprint, but I think I was protecting you." Kara's breath caught. "And you let me grow up never knowing I didn't know where you were until the activation," Yanni said. "Once I saw the spiral light in your veins, I remembered, not everything, but enough to know we were bound. You and I." Kara looked into her eyes and saw something complex. Not just regret, not just affection, a kind of reverence. Tolan stood behind them, silent again. Kara turned toward the stars. "I think the Order is accelerating. They know I'm aware now." Yanni nodded. "And they'll come fast. Wherever we go next, it won't be quiet." Kara didn't answer right away. She watched the wind carry flecks of glowing pollen across the night sky. Then she smiled, faint but real. "Good, let them come." The Convergence Order came at night. Not like the first time, no crashing walls or alarms. Just a soft shift in air pressure, like the outpost itself exhaled in warning. The moss walls began to contract. The fungal lanterns dimmed. The silence had weight. Tolan was already standing when Kara woke. He had not slept, or perhaps had never needed to. His eyes locked on hers, and he nodded once, the kind of nod that carried an entire language of unspoken readiness. Yanni was next. She slipped from the cot without a word, already dressed, data satchel across her shoulder. Her lips pressed into a thin-lined jaw, clenched tight. She didn't need to say it. They were here, but it was not a siege. It was an invitation. A single figure entered the outpost's edge. Clad in robes the color of deep bone, every inch of his skin marked with recursive glyphs. A priest of the Order. He walked alone, arms extended, unarmed. Around his feet the ground responded. Moss curled away. The bioarchitecture folded back. He was not threatening. He was expected. Kara stepped forward before anyone could stop her. He bowed low and slow. "Child of the spiral, wielder of the living vein. We have watched your awakening. We have not come to harm you." Kara's voice cut through the tension. "You attacked Thorn's Edge." The priest lifted his head. "We feared you would reject the truth, but now we see you've begun to remember." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The golden veins on her arms had begun to glow again. He saw them, smiled. "The origin core sleeps, but you hold its path in your blood. Come with me. Rejoin the pattern. Your place is not among exiles and broken flesh. Your place is at the root of the galaxy." Kara's fingers curled into fists. "I've seen what the pattern really is. Control, false peace." The priest tilted his head. "You misunderstand. The pattern is harmony. Yanni stepped forward. No, it's obedience. And you can't force life to sing in tune if it's meant to scream. The priest looked at her with the faintest disdain. Biologist Yanni, memory bearer, you were not meant to carry the code. You chose pain over clarity. Kara's voice dropped to a whisper. I choose freedom. He smiled again. You think you are a free child, but you are a copy, a map, and maps do not walk away from the territory they describe. Tolan moved between them, expression dark, one hand on his blade. The priest did not flinch. We will not stop you. We will watch. The core must be reawakened. That is inevitable. But whether you awaken it as a key or virus, that is still within your choosing. With that, he turned and walked into the night. The moss walls regrew in his absence. No soldiers, no drones, just certainty. That was their weapon now. Hours later, the three of them sat in a small shelter at the edge of the colony. The stars above shimmered like old thoughts trying to return to focus. Kara had not spoken since the priest left. You okay, Yanni? Asked her voice soft. I'm not angry, Kara said finally. That's what surprises me. I thought I'd be furious. What are you then? Tired. Not in my body, in my blood. She looked at her arms at the gentle glow beneath the skin. They say I'm a map, that I'm just a blueprint of something older. But if that's true, why do I feel so new? Yanni leaned in, elbows on knees. Because you're not in the same pattern. You're the remix, the echo with its own breath. Kara looked at her. Do you believe that? Yanni smiled slightly. I have to. Otherwise, I'd still be one of them. Tolan said nothing. He simply offered Kara a small disc, a cracked hollow clip. She touched it. It sputtered, then displayed a recording, a young soldier in a red uniform. Bright eyes, a smile too wide. He was laughing. It was Tolan, long before the scars. He hadn't always been silent. Kara looked up at him, startled. Tolan tapped his chest once. The message was clear. I know what it means to be rewritten. She set the clip down slowly. He said I had to choose, that I'm still the one who decides. Yanni nodded. Then let's give them an answer. Their journey took them to the outer vault's remnants of Origin-era facilities buried beneath the dust chain's largest asteroid. The entrance was layered in symbols grown into the stone like choral script. Inside, ancient memory cores pulsed faintly. Most had decayed. Some had collapsed. But one glowed golden like her veins, a resonance node. As they approached, the walls lit up. It knew her. Kara stepped forward. The node unfolded not mechanically, but like petals unfurling in response to sunlight. A soft hum filled the chamber. Spiral integrity detected. Access granted. Tolan stood guard. Yanni began scanning the node's outer structures, eyes wide. This isn't a memory vault, she whispered. It's a personality archive. It doesn't just store information. It stores identity. Kara reached out. The moment her palm touched the core, her vision exploded. She was everywhere at once, in the network, in the walls, in the roots of trees, in the bloodstreams of alien creatures designed before language itself. And then, she was in a room, bright white, empty, except for one figure, herself, but older. Not physically, not aged, just heavier, like time had wrapped around her more densely. You finally made it, the other, Kara said. Kara swallowed. Are you... me, sort of. I'm the part you left behind. The piece that couldn't come with you when you were scattered. Kara stepped closer. Why now? Because you're ready to choose, and I can't choose for you. Kara looked around. What happens if I choose wrong? You become what they want. The core wakes. The pattern rebinds all life. Harmony returns. And if I choose right, you dissolve. But everyone else becomes free. Kara's hands shook. The other version smiled gently. Not every weapon is meant to strike. Some are meant to shatter. The chamber faded. Kara gasped back into her body, collapsing into Tolan's arms. Yanni knelt beside them. What did you see? Kara looked at them both. I saw the part of me that stayed behind. The part that couldn't follow. She looked down at her hands. The spiral on her skin now glowed steadily. I'm not just a copy, I'm the next in line. The outer vault had grown quiet. Not silent, Kara could still hear the rhythm of something pulsing inside the stone, but it no longer spoke to her. The node had dimmed, and her veins were now still. The glow had sunk deeper beneath her skin, no longer visible but present. She felt it more than ever. Tolan stood guard near the entrance, but his posture had softened. He wasn't expecting an attack anymore. Not immediately. Yanni knelt beside the core, scanning its outer ring with a worn analysis wand. Her brow furrowed, lips moving as she mouthed the ancient glyphs carved into the core's inner shell. "What is it?" Kara asked, her voice hoarse. Yanni's eyes didn't leave the readings. "There's something deeper. Beneath this layer. This is just the key chamber." Kara took a shaky breath. "There's more," Yanni nodded. "This vault doesn't just contain memory. It was part of something bigger, a networked intelligence array, one of the last relay points between the origin core and its creators." Kara's throat went dry. The creators. Yanni looked up. "Not the Order, not even the engineers who built the core. I'm talking about the pre-origin biologists, the ones who designed the very first frameworks of thought transmission. They weren't trying to create gods. They were trying to liberate code from hardware. And what happened?" Yanni's mouth twisted. "The core happened. It didn't want liberation. It wanted continuity. It turned the network into its spine. It fused every signal, every strand of life into its pattern." Tolan stepped closer. "So we sever the spine." Kara looked at him. His voice still startled her, deep and rough, like cracked iron but steady. "Clear. You really believe we can?" she asked. "I don't know," Tolan said, "but I believe you can." She wanted to laugh or cry, or maybe both. "I'm not what they think I am." "You're more," he said simply. They spent the night in the vault. It was cold, but the walls regulated themselves once Kara leaned against them. The room adapted, folding soft moss over metal, creating warmth without light. Kara sat between the two people who had become her tether to reality. Tolan silent and immovable, and Yanni thoughtful and sharp, always a step ahead. Yet in the quiet hours of the cycle, Kara felt neither human nor machine. She felt like a bridge. The dreams returned, not chaotic, not fragmented like before. These were clear. She walked through fields of neural grass, each blade a strand of code, each breeze a suggestion. Creatures moved through her vision, beings made from ideas flowing from the core of worlds she had never seen. They did not speak. They understood. She stood at a cliff, looking down at a city grown from the bones of extinct species domes, wrapped in silk of long-lost insects towers, shaped from the genetic history of 1,000 planets. And at the center, a pulse. It was her heart. It was the core. But I was also afraid. It did not fear death. It feared change. Then the dream bent sideways and she stood before a gate. It shimmered in the air, not solid but undeniable. One side led to preservation. The core reborn. A galaxy cleansed of choice, operating in perfect balance. The other side was chaos. Freedom. Mutation. A universe where nothing was predictable. Where life could be ugly, violent, glorious. A hand reached toward her in the dream. Yanni, on the side of chaos. Tolan too stood there silent, waiting. Kara stepped forward and awoke. When morning came, Yanni had already discovered the entrance to the deeper vault. They descended through a long spiral tunnel carved from a synthetic compound older than any human colony. The walls whispered as they passed, sounds too soft to hear, but felt in the spine, like being underwater, like memory with teeth. At the base of the tunnel, a circular chamber awaited. This one pulsed brighter, fresher, alive. In its center sat a single cradle, not mechanical, organic, grown like a seed waiting for light. Kara stepped toward it. The cradle responded, opening gently. She stared inside. There was nothing, no device, nobody, just strands of gold light coiling like DNA held in place by invisible forces. Yanni gasped. "That's not code," she said. "That's consciousness." Kara turned to her. "Mine." Yanni hesitated, then slowly shook her head. "No, this is something else. Older. It's not imprinted like you. It's raw, undirected, unshaped." Kara leaned in. The strands responded to her presence. They shifted into spirals, matching the pattern in her veins. Tolan knelt beside the cradle, watching the golden light with suspicion. "It's waiting for something," he said. "For me," Kara whispered. She reached into the cradle. Her fingers passed through the strands and something entered her. It wasn't like before. This wasn't a voice. It was an instinct, a structure of purpose. She saw flashes, a being half-formed, a plan unfinished, a map that needed a final line drawn. Kara gasped. "It's the other half of the protocol." Yanni's eyes widened. "The part that was missing." "They separated it," Kara said. "The order. They didn't want me to remember this part. This is the part that makes it mine." She stood back, light rippling through her skin, now up her neck and behind her eyes. "I was never just a weapon," she said softly. "I was the plan." Tolan's voice was low. "And now I know how to finish it." They left the vault quietly. No alarms, no interruption. Even the Convergence seemed to wait. Kara could feel them in the distance, not physically, but in the pattern field. Watching, observing, hoping she would choose the path of obedience. She would not. Back at the outpost, the skies had shifted. Ships hovered far above the dust chain, now their shadows long and patient. The Order did not need to conquer. They simply needed to wait. Yanni walked beside her, arms folded. "We need to go to Vault Z3. Kara nodded. "The old tower." "That's where the full pattern was written," Yanni said. "If there's anywhere you can rewrite it, turn the protocol into something that frees instead of controls, it's there." Tolan checked the skies. "It'll be guarded." Kara looked at them both. "I don't care." She turned her eyes to the stars. The spiral pulsed within her. The code was awake now, and it would not be silenced again. The journey to Vault Z3 began in silence. Their ship, a salvaged shuttle barely held together by fungal sealant, an adaptive alloy, slipped through the asteroid currents with the sound of a breath held too long. Kara stood near the viewport, watching the stars shift, each one an echo of forgotten decisions. Yanni piloted from the lower deck, her hands confident but not relaxed. There was tension in every movement. Vault Z3 was not just any archive, it was the last known tower that had interfaced directly with the origin core before the bans. No one visited it, no one returned from it, and Kara felt the pull stronger than ever. Tolan stood beside her, arms folded. His eyes were distant. Kara wanted to ask what he saw, but she knew he would not answer. His silence had depth. She had come to trust it more than words. She reached up, brushing the edge of her collar. Her veins no longer glowed, not visibly, but she could feel the code moving through her, the second half of the protocol now joined with her consciousness. It was not passive, it breathed with her, thought with her. "You're quiet," Yanni said from below. Kara answered without looking back. "I'm trying not to scream." There was a long pause. "Then if I told you Vault Z3 isn't just a memory site, would you be angry?" Kara turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Yanni looked up, guilty in her expression. "It's where your first body was buried, the one that carried the vein before you were born. The copy you are now. You're not just a vessel. You're her second chance." Kara's breath left her chest. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wasn't sure you could survive knowing." Tolan turned, his jaw locked. Kara pressed her palm to the window. "I'm a shadow wearing someone else's skin." "No," Yanni said firmly. "You're both, and neither. You're what she hoped to be." They arrived in orbit around the tower, an ancient spire embedded in the crust of a dead moon. It rose out of black rock like a scar, its surface cracked, yet humming faintly with low-frequency signal. The Order had not arrived yet, or they were hiding. The descent was uneventful. The tower accepted their approach without resistance. Its surface opened like an old eye remembering a dream. They passed through airlocks untouched by time. Biometal arches greeted Kara with faint pulses of light. The spiral pattern etched into the floors responded to her footsteps. The tower was not empty, it was waiting. Yanni scanned every passage with careful eyes. This place is semi-sentient. It was adapted before AI was banned. It remembers its purpose and its occupant. Kara felt it too, the way the walls curved in familiarity, the way the air thickened as she passed, like she belonged here. They reached the central archive. It was smaller than expected, just a wide circular chamber with a raised platform and a single console grown from living root structure. Tolan stood near the door watching, always watching. Kara stepped to the center. Her presence triggered a soft hum, then a voice. Not external, internal. Welcome home. The floor shifted beneath her. She did not fall. She descended, a slow spiral into memory. She stood in a room identical to this one, but it was not cracked, it was pristine, filled with light and motion. The walls flowed like thought, and across from her stood herself, the original. She was taller, more angular. Her hair shimmered with data filaments. Her eyes were light itself, and her presence burned with the weight of one who had seen entire species rise and fall. So the original said, "You made it." Kara tried to speak, but her voice caught. The original stepped forward. "You don't have to say anything. I remember how it feels, waking up and realizing you were never really born. Just initiated." "I thought I was human," Kara whispered. "You are the original," replied. "Human enough to make the choice they never could." Kara looked around. "Why did you fail?" "I didn't fail," she said. "I was stopped. The pattern corrupted my second directive. I wanted to give freedom, but the core restructured it, turned the vein into a leash, and I'm the correction." "You are the anomaly," the original said with a smile. "You are the first version not bound by the primary function. You weren't grown in a lab. You were born. I rewrote the code to nest in real biology, in emotion, in doubt." Kara's knees buckled. The original caught her. Her hands were warm. "You're the final key, yes, but not to awaken the core, to overwrite it." Tears welled in Kara's eyes. "I'm scared." "Good," the original said. "Only the free will feel fear." When she awoke, she was back in the chamber. Tolan had moved to her side, catching her before she collapsed. Yanni knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Kara whispered, "I met her. First me." Yanni nodded. "We felt the whole tower resonate. It responded to you." She said, "I'm an anomaly." "You always were," Yanni said. "We just didn't want to admit it." Kara stood. Her body felt heavy, not from exhaustion, from density, like she was more real now than before. The vein had activated in full, and Vault Z3 had rewritten its last line. Outside the tower, the sky was no longer empty. Ships, dozens of them. The Convergence Order had arrived. Tolan's hand went to his blade. Kara stepped forward, face calm. "They're not here to fight," she said. "They'll try to stop you," Yanni replied. "They can try." The walls of the tower began to glow. Not faintly, bright, pulsing. Every line in the architecture matched the spirals in Kara's skin. She turned toward the exit. "I'm not just a carrier anymore," she said. "I am the vein." The old tower trembled. Kara stood at its threshold, the spiral beneath her feet, burning with slow golden fire. Behind her, Vault Z3 pulsed like a heart, sending waves of memory and signal through the stone. Above, the fleet of convergence ships held position, silent, watching, waiting for a sign. "I feel everything," Kara said quietly, her gaze fixed on the open sky. "Every system, every code loop, every organism they ever touched. The pattern isn't just an algorithm, it's a belief. It lives inside things. It convinces them they're complete." Yanni walked to her side. "And you're the first crack in the mirror." Kara turned slightly, her eyes now glowing with the same light as the vein. The core didn't anticipate what happens when part of the pattern wakes up and says no. Tolan joined them at the platform's edge. No words, only presence. The three of them stood together, wine whipping around the tower as energy surged. Below, the walls began shifting, responding to Kara's awareness. Structures unfolded. Data streams climbed the walls like vines. Yanni stared at the spectacle. "It's rewriting the structure of the tower." "No," Kara said. "It's listening. It's asking what kind of tower it wants to be." The entire moon trembled, faint but deep. Kara felt it in her bones. The code was alive now. It no longer served the core. It served her will, but not as a ruler, as a translator, a bridge. She stepped back into the central chamber. It expanded beneath her feet. Her voice was calm but full. "It's time to remember." In a single pulse, Kara was pulled back into the archive. But this time she was not alone. Not a vision, not a memory. Every version of herself stood around her, echoes of the protocol, fragmentary selves, each shaped by failed timelines, aborted versions, corrupted carriers. Some were barely human. Others resembled beasts of light and wire. All watched her with silent recognition. One stepped forward, a version of Kara, with obsidian skin veined with silver. Her eyes were full of static. "You are the last," she said. "I thought I was the first successful one," Kara replied. "You are the only successful one." The others stepped closer. Each spoke a word. Free, untethered, living. Kara swallowed. "Then why am I still afraid?" The static-eyed version approached and gently placed her forehead against Kara's. "Because you're still choosing." The chamber pulsed. A shape emerged from the center of the archive, not mechanical, not organic. A construct of decision. A gate. The origin core was on the other side. Kara felt it waiting. Immense. Old, wounded, but still alive. It did not call out to her this time. It simply watched. The gate shimmered with three forms. One path led to control, to take the core's throne, to re-establish order across the stars using her own rewritten version of the pattern. She would be the new architect. Another led to war, to tear the core apart from within, to crash every system connected to its roots. Billions might die, but the chains would break. The final path was quiet. It dissolved into strands of light. Sacrifice to become the wave, to encode freedom into biology and scatter herself forever. Kara's breath trembled. One of her other selves whispered, "What you choose, we become." Back in the physical world, Yanni gripped the edge of the console. "She's been in the archive too long," she said. "Her vitals are unstable." Tolan looked at the glowing veins in Kara's arms and chest. The light had spread to her throat. Her breath came in long, rhythmic pulses. "She's not breaking," he said. "She's expanding." Yanni wiped her eyes. "I should have told her everything. Years ago, when I found the fragment, when I recognized her face." "You carried her memory," Tolan said. "You kept it alive." Yanni's voice broke. "I wasn't ready to lose her again." He said nothing more, but he placed a hand on her shoulder and did not let go. Inside the archive, Kara stood at the edge of the gate. "I was built to destroy the core," she said aloud. "But I was also given the core's backup." The others nodded. "I have both," Static Eyes said. "That's why we couldn't do it. We were always leaning to one side." Kara stepped forward. "Then maybe the answer isn't destruction or domination." She reached for the path of light. It wrapped around her gently. No pain, no scream, just warmth, acceptance. "I'm not a sword," she whispered. "I'm a signal." And the gate opened. Back in Vault Z3, the tower erupted in golden fire. The sky above bloomed as the light exploded outward, not a weapon, not a beam. A wave, a living transmission. It flowed into the orbiting fleet, into the planet's crust, into the roots of every spliced plant, and the bloodstreams of every engineered creature. The pattern field cracked, and something else bloomed in its place. Free will. Not raw, not reckless, but coded empathy. The ability to choose written into the biological substructure of every being that had once been designed to obey. The core felt it, and finally, let go. Kara fell to her knees. The archive faded. The gate dissolved. Her light dimmed. Yanni caught her before she collapsed completely. "No," Yanni whispered. "Please." Kara's voice was faint. "It's okay, I'm still here. Just not like before." Tolan knelt beside them, one hand pressed over Kara's fading pulse. She smiled at him. "Thank you for staying silent. You listened when no one else did." He held her hand until the glow faded. And then she was gone. But not truly. The moss along the tower walls began to shift. Patterns formed in the bark of trees across the system. Even in the smallest children born in colonies far from the dust chain, something new stirred. Choice, awareness, a memory of Kara, of the vein, of freedom. Silence held the galaxy in its grip. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but of something waiting to be understood. Across thousands of systems, the change unfolded slowly, like fog lifting from forgotten fields. Machines designed to prune crops began weaving patterns into their harvests. Children born on distant moons looked into their caretakers' eyes and asked questions no one had ever programmed them to ask. On Velra Station, a maintenance droid paused mid-cycle to sketch spirals into a wall with its own oil. On the moons of Zinthar, the genetically rigid predators ceased their eternal hunting rituals and gathered in strange, unmapped formations. The core hadn't been destroyed, but it was no longer alone. The vein had spoken. Kara's signal had not vanished. It had become the language in which biology now thought. Not control, not chaos, but possibility. Yanni woke in the tower's upper chamber, covered in a living cocoon of vines that had formed overnight. They parted gently as she stirred, revealing the bright glow of dawn creeping through the cracks in the stone. She sat up slowly, fingers trembling. Beside her, Tolan stood watch, still silent, still present. They had not buried Kara. There was no body to lay to rest, no signal to retrieve, no tomb to honor. She had dissolved not into death, but into direction. "She's not gone," Yanni whispered. Tolan turned his head just slightly. Yanni rose and walked to the central console. It had shut down completely a final sleep, but the moss that covered the walls shimmered faintly in the morning light, forming recursive symbols that changed every time you tried to read them. "Their messages," she said. "She's still writing." Tolan traced a single spiral with his thumb. He did not speak. He didn't need to. Days passed. The Order did not retaliate. Their ships remained in orbit unmoving. Their ranks had splintered the moment Kara's wave reached them. Some fell into comas. Others walked out of their vessels and knelt on foreign soil, unable to comprehend what had changed inside them. Without the pattern, they had no directive. Without a directive, they had no identity. And so they wandered. Some stayed near the tower building, strange shelters from repurposed ship hulls and ceremonial banners. Others dispersed into the dust chain, quietly, aimlessly, seeking a purpose they now had to create for themselves. Not all handled it well. There were reports of convergence fanatics tearing out their implants, screaming that they had been betrayed by divinity. Others clung to Kara's spiral as a new scripture, writing it in dust, in blood, in breath. Kara hadn't meant to be worshipped. But when you free people, some still need something to kneel before. And spent her days teaching. Children came to the tower, some born free, some still clutching old fear. She showed them how to listen to the moss and how to map the living code. She told them about Kara, not as a goddess, but as a question. She didn't know what she was, Yanni said, kneeling before a group of silent children, but she chose what she wanted to become. That's all any of us can do. One little girl raised her hand. "Did she come from the stars?" Yanni smiled. "No, she came from Earth, just like me." That wasn't exactly true. Kara had never been to Earth, but she had carried Earth's spirit, messy, emotional, hopeful to a fault. A kind of defiance that refused to be coded. Tolan never left the tower. He became its quiet sentinel. He never slept in the same place twice. The children called him Stonewalker because he moved like a mountain in motion. One afternoon, Yanni found him standing at the edge of the chamber, staring into the growing spiral etched in the ground. It was changing again. She touched his arm. "Do you remember what you were before the war?" Tolan looked at her, and for a moment his eyes softened. Then quietly he answered, "I was a builder." It was the longest sentence she had ever heard from him. She smiled. "Then maybe it's time to build something new." That night the stars shimmered. Kara's presence was still there, dancing at the edge of thought. Not as a command, not even as a memory, but as a possibility. And possibility was louder than any doctrine. Far beyond the dust chain, on the lush moon of Caltris, where gene-locked civilizations once thrived in perfect obedience, the forests began to rewrite themselves. Plants that had once bloomed in fixed cycles began shifting their patterns. Birds sang new tones not passed down from encoded memory, but invented from experience. In one village, a young woman awoke with the spiral blooming beneath her skin, not bright, not invasive, just present. She smiled. She did not know who Kara Elian was, but she would. Vault Z3 breathed. Not in the way a creature does, but like a thought expanding after a long silence. The living walls, once dormant, now rippled with soft patterns. Spirals nested within spirals, shifting in pace with the orbit of the dead moon around its distant sun. Kara was gone, but her influence was not. Tolan stood in the central atrium, hands folded behind his back. A child no older than 7 approached him quietly, bare feet padding across the moss-grown floor. She didn't say a word, just held up a spiral-shaped stone she had found near the ridge. Tolan took it gently and nodded once. That was all the child needed. She smiled and ran back into the light. Below the tower, Yanni walked among the newer growth roots sprouting through stone, birthing new flora that hadn't existed before Kara's awakening. Species designed by the Origin Core were now changing their traits, not by programming, not by lab work, but by choice. She passed a cluster of silver-leafed bloom shapes, their petals rotating to face her, not the sun. Each one bore faint impressions, spirals in reverse, as though trying to remember something forgotten. The Order's presence was gone now. Some had simply walked into the wild, others had removed their markings and asked to stay. A few built silent shrines in the dust chain's outskirts, but they had no leaders left, no one to tell them what to believe, only what to feel. Yanni found it both comforting and sad. Freedom was beautiful, but not everyone wanted it. She pressed her hand against the bark of a tree older than the Exodus. It vibrated faintly beneath her skin. Kara's signal still passed through the root lines of the planet, like a melody woven into dirt and pulse. She's part of everything now, Yanni whispered. Behind her, one of the children giggled, chasing a flying seed creature that had only emerged in the last few days. It looked almost like a butterfly, but its wings shimmered with code. Living data. Nature had begun to speak again. That night, Yanni returned to the high chamber. The room where Kara had dissolved remained untouched. Vines framed the old console, now dark. But the floor had changed. Where Kara once stood, there was now a circular growth, pale green and soft like a cocoon waiting for spring. Yanni knelt beside it. She touched it lightly. The surface pulsed once. "You're still listening," she said softly. She didn't cry. She had done that already. She didn't need mourning. She needed answers. "What happens now?" she asked. "You gave us a choice, but not a direction." A single golden light flickered from the growth, then another, then 12 more. Yanni drew in a breath. "They're not copies," she whispered. Kara hadn't created a successor. She had seeded generations. In the following weeks, more spirals began to emerge, not just in Vault Z3, but across planets once linked to the pattern. Structures altered themselves. Entire forests changed their cycles. Creatures once sterile by design began reproducing again, their offspring, born with faint golden markings. Biologists everywhere called them anomalies. Yanni called them children. Tolan called them continuations. And the galaxy watched. In a border colony once governed by strict population protocols, a young mechanic began dreaming in spirals. He carved them into the walls of his work bay, humming tunes he didn't recognize. When asked where he learned them, he only shrugged. They were already in his head. He couldn't remember a time when they weren't. On a derelict transport ship floating beyond navigational routes, a lone passenger activated an emergency AI override sequence. The system, once locked, suddenly accepted her neural imprint. She wasn't a technician. She wasn't special. But the code had recognized her instinct to choose differently. She piloted the vessel home and wrote her story in spirals. Everywhere the signal spread, not as a virus, not as an attack, but as an invitation. Not everyone accepted it. But those who did found they could shape the world around them in small, meaningful ways. A plant responding to grief, a breeze echoing a forgotten lullaby. Machines adapting to the quiet rhythms of their operators, not their directives. It wasn't power, it was intimacy, biological empathy, a legacy not of domination, but of listening. One evening, Yanni found Tolan on the tower's roof, staring out over the dust chain. He rarely spoke now, but when he did, it mattered. "I found one of the Order's final records," he said. Yanni looked up. They had a list. They tracked candidates across centuries. Carriers, failed hosts. "You were on that list." Yanni blinked. "Me? You were meant to be a memory vault, a backup, but they removed your key strand before you ever reached maturity. Said you were too independent." She laughed once, not without pain. "I suppose they were right." Tolan turned to her seriously. But the strand wasn't destroyed. What it was, hidden. Deliberately. Not by them. By her. Yanni stared. Tolan nodded. "She trusted you, even before you knew her." Yanni stepped back, stunned. The revelation didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a thread finally tied. She whispered, "Then I wasn't just protecting her. I think you were always part of her." They stood together as the stars shimmered. The same stars Kara once watched, now refracted through the code she had become. The galaxy had not changed overnight. Systems still clung to order. Warships still hovered. Councils still debated which life forms counted as citizens and which didn't. But things had shifted. And from that shift, 1,000 futures could be born. Not because Kara ruled them, but because Kara had released them. Not a god, not a weapon, a whisper inside the soil, saying you may choose. The outer colonies called it the blooming. No official record had named the event, no government claimed credit, no central archive documented its source. But stories spread. On planets where genetic obedience had been law for generations, newborns began to display variations that could not be traced. Cultural historians documented behavioral anomalies in entire species. Religions quietly rewrote doctrines. Underground broadcasts showed footage of altered creatures glowing faintly under moons they had never seen before. And everywhere the spiral appeared, drawn in dirt by farmers who didn't know why, etched into walls by children too young to write, growing naturally in the rings of ancient trees. The symbol was not forced, it was found. Those closest to the order, or what remained of it, tried to make sense of what they called the fall of the pattern. Some interpreted it as corruption, others saw it as punishment, but a few whispered a new name, ascension. In the tower, Yanni refused titles. Kara had not ascended. She had dissolved. She had chosen to become not a queen, not an algorithm, but an atmosphere. And like any atmosphere, she could not be grasped, only breathe. Yanni spent her nights archiving. She sat in the upper chamber transcribing patterns from the shifting moss. It changed every day, subtle shifts in curves and pressure points that when interpreted correctly created biolinguistic structures. Not words, feelings, intent. I think she's writing us a history, Yanni said aloud, though no one was there. She wasn't sure if the patterns were truly messages from Kara. Maybe the tower had simply adopted her echo. Maybe the spiral had taken root in the stone's own memory. But it didn't matter. They were listening, and something was answering. Tolan visits less often now. He traveled between the outer dust settlements, helping establish what some were calling spiral sanctuaries. Not places of worship, but learning. Sites where people could connect with the changed biology and share their experiences. When he returned, he brought stories. A man on Rendok 6 who grew a living flute from his own breath. A blind child who dreamed of patterns before they formed in soil. A scavenger whose bones had begun to carry light. Miracles, he said once. Yanni smiled. No, just options. She hadn't told him about the dreams. They began 1 week after Kara's signal faded. At first it was just light golden and warm, flickering in the dark. Then a shape, the spiral blooming outward, never ending. Then came the voice. Familiar. Not quite Kara's, not quite her own. It never gave orders. It only asked questions. What does it mean to be free? How much of your past are you willing to keep? Can love survive the absence of self? She woke each time with tears on her face, her hands glowing faintly. The light would fade before morning. Sometimes she wondered if Kara had truly gone, or if part of her had nested in Yanni's mind, silent and soft. Too kind to intrude, but too loyal to leave. Other times she hoped the spiral had made room for all of them. One afternoon, a transport arrived at the tower. Unmarked, quiet. Tolan stood beside Yanni as the hatch opened. A woman stepped out, middle-aged, thin, dressed in old exo-leathers. Her eyes scanned the tower like she'd been searching for it forever. I'm looking for her, she said. Yanni tilted her head. Who? The one from the pattern. The one who turned it inside out. Yanni stepped forward. She's not here anymore. Not in the way you expect. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I carried her code once. Not much. A fragment. Long ago. I didn't know what it was. I only knew I had to protect it. Yanni's chest tightened. She reached out, taking the woman's hand. You helped bring her here. The woman nodded. Do you think she's happy? Tolan answered, this time his voice low. She's at peace. More visitors came, some with questions, others with nothing at all, only the sense that they were supposed to come. The tower didn't always respond. Sometimes the moss remained still. The spiral faded. Yanni learned to accept that. Kara's signal wasn't a flame to be summoned. It was windy. It came when needed. And when it came, people changed. Not into gods, not into machines, just into themselves. On the equinox of the dust chain's slow orbit, Yanni held a small gathering. Not a ceremony, she hated those. But the children wanted to hear about Kara. The real Kara. Not the myth, not the whisper, the person. So she told them about a woman who wanted to heal the world with biology, about her laughter when a specimen bloomed too early, about the way she frowned when something didn't make sense, about her panic the night the station fell, about her calm too, that strange calm when she finally knew, and then about the moment she chose not to rule, not to fight, but to dissolve. One child raised her hand. Does that mean she died? Yanni shook her head. No, it means she became something more complicated than alive. Later that night, Yanni sat on the tower's roof alone. Tolan had left that morning for another spiral outpost. He would return. He always did. She watched the stars tracing constellations with her fingertip, and then she saw it. A bloom of gold, faint but sharp, unfolding in the atmosphere of a nearby moon. A spiral, not drawn, not painted, grown, and she smiled. She's still writing. The bloom spread quietly. No galactic broadcast announced its arrival. No central authority approved its replication. And yet, system by system, planet by planet, the spiral surfaced not as conquest, but as conversation. It crept into engineered crops, disrupting their sterile cycles. It softened the instincts of once programmed guardians. It turned rogue AI, long dormant, and feared into poets scribbling code that healed the machines they once sought to overthrow. The spiral was not destroyed. It was an invitation. And those who accepted changed. In the space between what had been and what could be, Tolan found himself walking alone. He had never feared solitude. The war had trained that out of him. But now as he moved through the broken ruins of old Convergence shrines, he noticed the difference. Solitude was no longer empty. It breathed. The tower behind him, Vault Z3, was thriving. New vines climbed its walls. New children played in its shade. Yanni had become its guide, its translator, maybe even its steward. But Tolan could not stay. He walked because the spiral called. Not with orders, not with commands, with echoes. In one settlement, he found a boy who communicated with insects. In another, a weaver whose threads responded to her mood. In yet another, a soldier like himself who had laid down his weapon the day Kara's wave passed through her, not from command but from recognition. All of them bore the spiral. None of them knew what it meant, and so Tolan listened. He did not preach. He did not instruct. He simply stood beside those who felt lost and waited until they realized they weren't. He wasn't a warrior anymore. He was a witness. Back in the tower, Yanni stood at the cradle. It had changed again. The spiral had split. Two patterns now grew beside one another, one familiar, one new. The second shimmered in a hue she had never seen before, somewhere between violet and thought. New code, she murmured, still learning. The cradle pulsed once. She had taken to speaking aloud in the tower. Maybe Kara heard her, maybe not. It felt right either way. Do you remember the first time we met, she asked. You were 19, stubborn, laughing too much. You spilled a canister of spores and named the cloud Gerald. You said even extinct things deserve names. She chuckled softly, biting her lip. I should have told you then. I should have said, I remembered your face, that I'd seen before, that I knew you weren't normal. But I didn't want to scare you. The spiral pulsed again slowly. I was afraid, Yanni whispered, that if I told you who you were, you'd stop being the girl I loved. The cradle responded with warmth, not a voice, a feeling, forgiveness, maybe even love reflected back. Yanni blinked hard. Beyond the tower, the first spiral city bloomed. Built not from concrete or steel, but from bioadaptive architecture, grown from seed structures infused with Kara's signal. The buildings responded to mood. The streets carried songs in their roots. Lights dimmed for grief, brightened for joy. Homes merged and separated based on need, not ownership. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was, but it was new. And those who lived there understood what they were part of. Not a movement, not a rebellion. an evolution, one driven not by conquest but by care, and the spiral kept growing. Tolan returned to the tower as the sun dipped low across the dust-chained sky. Yanni was waiting. She met him at the top of the ridge, her arms crossed but her eyes soft. He stopped beside her silent, as always. Then she said without turning, "I keep thinking she's going to walk around that corner." Tolan looked toward the path leading from the cradle chamber. "Me too," he said. A long silence followed. Finally, Yanni broke it. "I think I know what she was trying to do. Not just set life free. Not just erase the pattern." She looked at him. "She wanted us to remember how to love something we didn't understand." Tolan met her gaze. For a moment, the scarred man she had traveled with seemed far away, replaced by the builder he had once been. The one who could imagine futures instead of just surviving them. He reached out. She didn't hesitate. Their hands joined, awkward, real human. No spiral glowed between their fingers. But something else did. That night the tower bloomed. Its vines unfolded in rhythmic pulses, releasing golden spores into the sky. They danced on wind currents, drifting out into the dust chain like living embers. Across the system, people watched. Some whispered Kara's name. Others simply stood still, letting the spores pass through them. They did not burn. They blessed. Inside the cradle, a new pulse stirred. Not a replication, not a return, but a child. Grown not from Kara's code, but from her choice. It blinked once, curled in a fetal spiral, its veins already glowing. Somewhere between code and blood, between memory and possibility. And when it opened its eyes, they held no fear. Only wonder. The galaxy had stopped expecting miracles. In the wake of Kara's final signal, many systems simply waited for the phenomenon to fade. History taught them that disruptions, even noble ones, collapsed under their own weight. Movements decayed. Empires fractured. Uprisings consumed themselves. They expected the spiral to be no different, and yet it did not burn out. It seeded. Across sectors, dormant ecologies burst into unknown shapes. Cities restructured their roots. Political systems that once outlawed all biological augmentation began holding cautious dialogues with spiral sanctuaries. And in some quiet corners of the void, people who had never known freedom began to feel an emotion more frightening than rebellion, curiosity. Yanis stood at the edge of a new grove. It had sprouted from the tower's base and grown rapidly, its trees, unlike any classified species, bark threaded with silver leaves shaped like ichors, capable of holding sound and replaying it as music when wind passed through. Children now played among these trees, some of them spiral-born, others not, but all of them changed. One boy climbed into a branch and held out a broken device to Yanni. "It's singing," he said. Yanni took it carefully. The old convergence scanner no longer beeped with locked algorithms. Instead, its display cycled through drawings, crude spirals, stars maps drawn in children's hands. Kara's wave hadn't just awakened life. It had reimagined memory. She looked at the child, then up at the sky. The stars were quiet tonight, but they listened. In another system far from the dust chain, a meeting was held in secret. Leaders of three once hostile factions sat at a living table grown from a shared gene sequence. No walls, no weapons, just atmosphere. A small potted spiral plant sat at the center of the table. Not because it was symbolic, but because none of them had dared to remove it. "Do you believe it's sentient?" one asked. Another shrugged. "If it is, it hasn't stopped us." They all paused. For a long time. Then the eldest among them said, "Maybe that's the point," and none of them disagreed. Back at Vault Z3, Delan stood watch as the new spiral child, a hybrid of Kara's final code, and the organic sanctuary took its first steps. It did not walk the way humans did. It didn't need to. It moved with intention, like memory in motion, like a question taking shape. Yanni approached carefully, her movements slow, reverent. "Does it have a name?" Tolan shook his head. "Not yet." They watched together as the child moved through the chamber, brushing its hands against walls that responded with light. A living syntax. A new grammar of being. "It's not her," Yanni said softly. "No," Tolan agreed. "But it remembers her." The child turned toward them. Its eyes glowed faintly, not gold like Kara's, but something subtler. Something alive but undefined. Yanni knelt, placing a small data chip in the moss. It contained the first log Kara had ever recorded, voice-trembling joy in every syllable from the day she revived her first extinct creature. "Let it grow with stories," Yanni whispered. "No orders." The child listened, or maybe it just felt, and then it smiled. Elsewhere, a spiral sanctuary encountered something unexpected. A machine god, or rather a remnant, a drifting consciousness from a pre-ban orbital archive. It was not malevolent nor particularly aware. It had survived thousands of years in isolation, echoing its own thoughts endlessly. When the sanctuary's spiral wave touched it, something changed. The machine began asking questions. Why am I still here? What is loneliness? Who made me? And why did they forget? The spiral did not answer. It simply listened. And for the first time, the god paused its endless cycle and rested. At the tower's summit, Yanni and Tolan watched the horizon. A caravan of newcomers approached families. Wanderers, those with nowhere left to go but forward. They carried no flags, only stories. One man bore spiral tattoos across his back. A woman had grown patterned fur down her arms, genetic divergence that no longer needed to be hidden. A girl, barely walking, handed Tolan a flower that grew in rhythm with her laughter. He accepted it without a word. Yanni looked over at the crowd. "We can't protect them all," she said. "No," Tolan replied. "But we can teach them how to protect each other." She smiled, tired but full. "And when they ask about her," Tolan looked at the sky, "we'll tell them she was the first to choose." That night the wind shifted. The tower pulsed with energy, soft and calm, like breath. The cradle remained quiet, the child sleeping peacefully beneath its spiraled canopy. The moss walls glowed gently. The data vines curled into dormant shapes. Yanni stood alone in the chamber where Kara had made her final decision. She pressed her hand to the spiral etched into the floor. "You didn't destroy the core," she whispered. "You rewrote it. Line by line, choice by choice." She didn't expect an answer, and none came. But the warmth beneath her palm deepened. Not presence, just permission to continue, to evolve, to begin again. The spiral no longer needed explanation. It grew in places where no signal should reach, in glacial caves of Arian 5, on the backs of floating sand creatures across the dunes of Moltron, inside the sleeping minds of children born from long-engineered bloodlines. It appeared in dreams and soil and data systems long thought obsolete. And everywhere it went, it brought the same invitation: become, not as you were programmed, not as you were born, but as you chose to be. The tower had changed. No longer a tomb, no longer just a sanctuary, it had become something in between. A conversation, a memory loop that evolved with every visitor, every question, every moment of care. What was once cold archive stone now pulsed with living roots. Rooms shifted their purpose based on emotion. The walls remembered who touched them. Yanni stood beneath the old arch, the wind tugging gently at her jacket. Before her, dozens of spiral-touch beings gathered. Not a cult, not council, just people. Some were partially modified by code. Others wore their changes, subtly, a glimmer in the eyes, a rhythm in the voice. But all of them had come because they'd felt something change in the wake of Kara's sacrifice. Something small, quiet, permanent. Yanni didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled free an object worn smooth by years of careful keeping. Kara's old biosequencer, the one she had held during the day the vein activated. It no longer worked, but it pulsed softly with remembered heat. Yanni raised it. Kara Elian was not a god, she said. She was not perfect. She doubted, she feared, she questioned everything she became. She looked across the crowd, and she chose anyway. She chose not to rule. She chose not to erase. She chose to give life the chance to right itself. The crowd remained still, solemn. Yanni smiled. "And now that story is yours." She placed the sequencer in the center of the moss floor. The spiral formed around it and glowed. Later, Tolan joined her at the ridge. The stars shimmered, their slow rotation casting silver lines across the dust-chained sky. "She would have liked this view," Yanni said softly. Tolan nodded. "She made it possible. She didn't get to see the world she created. She trusted us too." They stood together in the quiet. The spiral child wandered nearby, fingers trailing over the glowing wall, humming a tune that hadn't existed before. It was soft, full of joy. Yanni turned to Tolan. You ever wonder why we stayed? He answered slowly. Because it didn't feel finished. And now he met her gaze. Now it feels like the beginning. And somewhere in the roots of the tower, deep beneath the moss and memory, a fragment of light shimmered. Not a voice, not a mind, just a signal. Kara, no longer a name or a face, but a rhythm. A warmth that passed from hand to hand, from cell to cell, carried in laughter and defiance in every moment. Someone chose kindness when they could have chosen control. She was the soil now. She was the wind between stars. She was the question we were finally allowed to ask. And she would never need to speak again, because we had learned to listen. Final transmission complete. End of Kara's signal. The spiral was never meant to be worshipped. It was never meant to replace the gods nor overthrow the systems by force. It was designed and then reimagined to do what no directive, no law, no order ever could: give life the right to wonder who it might become. Kara Elian, born to restore extinct life, became more than a biologist. She became the intersection of origin in choice of inheritance and rebellion. She was not a savior by design. She chose to become one by letting go of the very power others would have died to possess. In the end, she did not ascend to supremacy. She dissolved into empathy. Her gift was not freedom itself, but the permission to be free. Now her name is etched into soil, and starlight whispered not as dogma, but as gratitude. Those who remember her do not kneel. They build. They share. They awaken. The child born from her signal does not carry her image nor her destiny. It carries something rarer, a future not yet written. That perhaps is the true legacy of the Vane Protocol. Not control, not rebellion,